Okay, so good morning. I'm Jeff Brown. This is Saturday Morning Breakfast, and this program will be recorded for later broadcast on Stowe TV. I've got a couple of announcements before we get started. Next month, 16th, we'll be hearing from Boston area gleaners who will talk about their efforts to get excess food to food banks in the area. And then in December, we'll hear from Bob Van Meter, who is an Acton resident, and he will talk about housing racial discrimination, including redlining practices in Acton. Okay, today's guest is Rashawn Martin from the Boston Public Schools. So if you have a question, put it in the chat box. Either I'll ask the question or I'll call on you to ask the question. Rashawn and my wife met Rashawn on a ferry boat trip this summer, and he gave me his business card, and we had a couple of conversations, and we're very happy to have you today, Rashawn.
Excellent. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me. So good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody on this Saturday morning. I'm grateful for Zoom because I'm actually in Washington, D.C. for some other meetings. So I'm sitting in a little hotel room for this before the rest of my day starts, but I came yesterday. But it's good. So as Jeff mentioned, my name is Rashawn Martin, and I'm the Director of Programs and Services for Educators of Color for the Boston Public Schools. I've been in education for 20 years now, starting as a middle and a high school history teacher, where I taught early American history, ancient history, and American government. I also served as the high school department head for history. This was all at the Boston Latin School. I was the principal both at Cathedral High, which is a Catholic school, and then City on a Hill, which is a charter school. And then for 7 years, I was the director for social studies for the whole school district of in Haverhill. So those are all my roles prior to taking on this work beginning in 2019. So in a lot of ways, it's my first non-academic position in this field, but it's, it's valuable work, and I really have enjoyed doing it. So today I'm just going to share a few thoughts and information with you about the issue around educator diversity in our public schools, specifically sharing with you some of those more sort of global issues here in the Commonwealth, but then also looking at what we're trying to specifically do here in Boston, and then sort of what's happening now at the state level, which really would give you an opportunity to kind of sort of watch it unfold, and even lean in to ask further questions, or even to advocate if you so desire, as we move forward. So here's sort of our our challenge. We talk about systems and sort of systemic racism, certainly the hot topic in our country today, and we think about it from the lens of the barriers that it creates to hiring and retaining educators of color, pretty much at every stage of the process. From kids going to college or even enrolling in educator preparation programs, how educators get selected and hired for certain positions and into certain districts, and then certainly the teacher test. And so what we've been trying to do here in the BPS is just sort of counteract all of those things by sort of aggressively and innovatively coming up with interventions at every stage of the process get someone to a full-time professionally licensed teacher. So this is being slowly updated, but as of uh-oh, so now it's moving too fast. What is going on? The slide deck isn't working properly. Hold on. Let's go this way. Back to where we were. I'm going the wrong way. Come on. Oh, all the pop-ups. Wait a minute. Give me a second. Let's do that. There we go. Okay. So, as of around 2000 and zoom my little bit, as of the end of 18, this is sort of really what we're looking at in terms of, about 4 years ago, that across the Commonwealth we only have about 8% of the teachers, at least for identified teachers, that are color. And it's interesting that the BPS in the Boston Public Schools, we only have 6% of all of the teachers here in the state. All right, and yet the Boston Public Schools actually accounts for the great majority of the educators of color here in the Commonwealth. And so, we certainly know that it's important for all of our school districts, especially to have a diverse workforce if they can get it. But this is sort of the state of the challenge that we face. So right about now, as they're starting to sort of crunch new numbers, that 8% we believe is hovering around 10 or 11% at this point, which is great that the needle has that the needle has moved. And even here in the Boston Public Schools, we have been able to incrementally move up the percentage points in the last 2 years. So now we're going to be hovering around 23% Black educators, and we're looking at probably 30, maybe about 36, 38%, 36 to 38% fully of educators of color. So there's all sorts of research out there talking about the impact of diverse educators, where when we talk about staff diversity, that actually improves academic outcomes for all students. So not only for the kids of color, but actually also for for the white students too. And then the research has also told us that a Black child, especially, who has just one Black teacher or someone who looks like them in elementary school, is actually more likely to graduate and enroll in college. And it's actually significantly higher if a child is taught by more than one Black teacher, or at least two. So this is what sort of the current numbers look like in terms of the balance of sort of the students versus educators. And this is Boston as a whole. It's not just the Boston Public Schools, so it includes all of the schools that we have here in Boston. And so you can see, actually, at least in terms of the Black population, if you have 29% students, 28% educators, that's actually pretty close, and it's a gap we're certainly trying to these are some of the gaps that we're trying to close. And certainly there's a big focus now even trying to pick up this trying to close this Latino gap, especially in Boston, considering the number of just Latinx immigrant students that we have, and then kids who speak Spanish and families who speak Spanish, English learners. And then you can see the gap between the makeup of the student body in terms of the number of white students who are actually in Boston versus how many white teachers there are. All right, and you have 52% versus the big gap, that we're trying, that either a lot of ways we illegally, trying to still close based on a federal order that's still in place from desegregation in the early 70s, is to close, is to continue to try to close this gap between the number of white educators that we have and the number of Black educators. So overall, here in the Boston Public Schools, we have about 85. Last year, it's really 89. It's about 89% of the student body in the Boston Public Schools are actually students of color, but yet only about 38% of the educators in the school district identify as an educator of color. So in terms of the teacher population, reflecting the demographics of the students, in the Boston public schools, especially, it's actually pretty wide. So, if you may or may not know a little history here, so there was a court order that actually extends back to the early. Actually extends back, coming out of the busing and desegregation in the early 70s, and then in terms of the students, and then sort of relitigated, in the early 90s, in an appeals court to uphold it. So Judge Garrity, you may have seen him or heard of him. He had required BPS to achieve and maintain a desegregated faculty, meaning teachers and guidance counselors, and then, quote, comprised of not less than 25% Blacks and 10% other minorities. Now, at some point in the late 90s, early 2000s, the district actually got there to the 25%. All right, they're long past the 10%, and so the federal court then sort of walked away. And but at this moment, we've been hovering around 22% of Black educators, probably for the last 6 or 7 years. And so there's a lot of pressure on the city of Boston and the Boston schools right now to get that number at least back to 25%, to avoid sort of a relitigation. So there's kind of a sort of a watchdog group out there that's comprised of some community leaders, the Black Educators Association of Massachusetts, the NAACP, of Boston, who are sort of monitoring progress and kind of sort of keeping some pressure on the system. And the key piece, especially for me, is that there's also a RIF, piece to a reduction in force to this order, so that even if you had to cut the staff, right, should there be some kind of massive layoff, by 3%, you actually we're actually expected to still maintain that 25%. So in theory, we probably need about 28 or 29%, if not close to 30, in order to actually land at 25, should we ever have to cut the staff. Now, look, we'll be excited, I think next month when we go to school committee to say that we've gotten to 23. 1% is a good number of educators. So we move. So now we have a goal that which is very ambitious, but that by the end of FY of the 23 school year, so meaning well, not this school year, but the following school year, that we'll get this number to 25%. So, that's our goal. So how we're doing some of these things, we've tried to create some innovative programs. Some of them have, we've gotten some grants from the Department of Education and other supports within the districts. So to quickly go to some of those, we have a teacher cadet program where we're trying to build up in-house, trying to identify students as young as middle school to get them excited about becoming an educator, giving them opportunities to learn the business and to shadow teachers and to be a part of the process. And then it's a full-blown program when you get to high school. We have some partners attached to it to be able to provide scholarships for students who finish our teacher cadet program to go into undergrad to continue their studies with the idea that then once they're finished, they would come back. They would basically be guaranteed to be hired here in the Boston Public Schools. So right now, it's a very nascent program, but we do have a handful of kids who are in undergrad right now, that we're working with and supporting, and hopefully, we'll begin to have this pipeline of teacher cadets. Something that the superintendent is very passionate about. We also have tried to tap into the community. We know that a lot of our would-be teachers, especially educators of color, are sitting right at our parent-teacher meetings. Maybe showing up in different programs, dropping kids off at school. So we created this accelerated community to teacher program where we have this intensive 12-month program to get Boston residents, career changers, paras, our subs who already have, bachelor's degrees, to get them that experience that is required by the Department of Ed to become a provisionally licensed teacher. All right. So even just last year, coming out of this past school year, we 97% of the people in the program are candidates of color. All right, so we're very excited about this, and as we continue to try to grow this capacity. And then we also have a fellowship program. So this is what so we try to then so this is really an in-house educator preparation program, because you have to have formal educator prep in order to get an initial license, right? But there might be some folks who might necessarily be ready to get there to do it, at a master's level. But this is also, you can do this program on the job. And it also, so it's been approved by the Department of Ed, and it will allow our educators to get initially licensed. And so just real quick, to become a teacher in Massachusetts, you have to have a bachelor's degree. All right, you have to pass a teaching test. All right, there's several of them if you're elementary. Actually, there are 5. All right, and then there are 3 if you're secondary, middle school, or high school. And so, but you can start teaching with just a bachelor's degree and having passed the exams, which is what they call provisional licensure. And then you have to do educator preparation in order to get initial licensure. And so, but most people do their educator preparation through a master's program, because the master's program is actually required ultimately. I think you get 5 years to do it in order to eventually become professionally licensed, which is the last step in becoming a professional educator. So we know. So one of the barriers we know is that the teacher exam is a real barrier to a lot of educators, especially educators of color, because most of them have gone through some non-traditional paths or don't have a whole lot of experience in doing standardized testing, and so or may not have taken a standardized test in a long time, especially if we're bringing people out of the community and trying to get them into education. So in-house we have provided free preparation support for the Massachusetts teacher exam, and we actually have had some good return on investment. So this is just our numbers from back between 2019 and 2020, where out of the where we had 80 people pass out of the 97 folks who completed the program, so the 82%. And our prep program actually has a better pass rate than any of the current preparation programs that are offered anywhere in the Commonwealth. And the district hasn't really taken this piece on, not the district, the state, but they do believe in our program, and so they've leaned in and have provided a significant amount of funds through what they call the department's diversification grant, to be able to give us funds to expand. So we'd like to be able to grow capacity, especially in this space. We don't think the test is going away anytime soon, even though there's a debate about alternative pathways. The test is still there, and the test is the test, right? We have to get people to pass it, and so we're trying to grow capacity to be able to support more folks, because as you can imagine, the list for prep support is hard. So, and then the other way we try is just recruitment. And so we have this early hiring pool. Studies show that the sooner you go out and campaign, we kind of do it like admissions now, sort of a year-round process, to try to find, to try to get more educators of color. So even last year, 157 Black educators, in our early hiring pool. And so these are all sorts of numbers that we're just trying to increase. And so we do. So I do have a recruitment partners in our office as a team who are just sort of constantly on the stump now year round to recruit people to apply to the Boston Public Schools. And our early hiring pool actually for next September, just opened up earlier this week for people to apply to. So we can screen people early, make recommendations to the school leaders. And so when the hiring process begins on March 1st, we have all these cultivated candidates, who are ready to go, and hopefully a big pool of diverse candidates that the principals can tap right into. All right, and then so ultimately we monitor, we monitor, it's just exits, retirements, resignations, people who were just non-renewed for all sorts of reasons. We were sort of thrilled that the number of educators, and we'll be reporting this again, but this is our 2020 report. So we were thrilled that the number of educators is lower in terms of those who had left, went down to 275 from 361. Now, grant that the percentage of educator exits of color was higher, but it's also out of a lower number of total educator exits. And we certainly flagged for the school committee up here that we had less Black educators exit the district in our 2020 report than we did the year before, and certainly almost half from where it was at its highest back in 2014, for whatever reasons those were. I wasn't on the staff at that point. So at least in my direct work and direct support with all educators of color in the district through the work that I'm doing, I was taking credit for lowering the number in the first year on the job. So how we're doing that, we have a lot of retention programs. So not only do we have to bring Black educators and educators of color into the district, we got to figure out how to keep them. And so I offer monthly social and professional events for all of our educators of color. I have a bunch of partners now in our discounted degree completion programs for people who need to get finished bachelor's degrees, or people who want to get master's degrees, or even doctoral degrees. BU has signed on, Southern New Hampshire University. We just recently picked up Boston College, the Woods College of, I think, continual studies, or over BC. Excelsior College, which is located in the South, has joined us, and also Endicott and Emmanuel. And right now I'm in conversations with Salem State to bring them on board to be able to do something with our with our library professionals as we try to diversify that, that space too. We also provide executive coaching for both our men and women educators of color, in sort of in the self-leadership programs like in-house, culturally responsive professional development. And then we have a ton of affinity groups, and our affinity group work is really new. A lot of that really was a request or a desire to create more safe spaces in the wake of the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. So I host a series of affinity groups. Some of them meet weekly, some of them meet monthly, throughout the course of the year. And we have them for our Asian employees, for our central office, Black and Latinx employees. There's actually even a white allies group who are trying to think about how we become more anti-racist. And they're doing great work. A network for our school leaders of color, and we'll see, and we're trying to figure out how to grow that capacity, because we know that there are more, especially amongst our schools, who want to be able to have, affinity groups and providing, safe spaces, especially for the educators of color to be able to sort of collaborate and celebrate. So now to the state level. So we have this coalition actually led right now by the Latinos for Education organization. And these are some of the partners that are involved, including the Boston Public Schools, who have now come together across all 6 stages of the educator pipeline to lean in with the state, where Senator Jason Lewis, I believe, and Representative Alice Peisch, who are the co-chairs on the Education Committee, have offered a bill known as, which is called the Educator Diversity Act. And in fact, I think the first hearing for the bill is on Monday, virtually, to see how we can lean in to really supporting and in a lot of ways holding accountable the entire state of Massachusetts to improve to increase workforce diversity within our public school districts. So the Educator Diversity Act. So it's H682 and Senate 366. All right. And so what the bill in a nutshell is going to try to do, all right, is try to establish a pathway for alternative certification. All right, so maybe there are other ways for us to identify who is a qualified, who is a qualified teacher, or who should be a licensed teacher, beyond than just making them pass a test. All right, so that's one. So that's one piece. Creating an educator diversity data dashboard so that in real time the public, and administrators in the community can monitor how all the districts are doing in terms of the diversity of their staff, vis-a-vis the community that they serve, and then also meaning the students, but then also also looking at the demographics of the, either of the town, all right, or the towns, that they serve, obviously, because we know some of our school districts are regional. And then the bill seeks to require some uniformity across all of our districts, all right, and how they go about their DEI work, and how they hire, all right, and how they promote, their educators of color, requiring, bias work and bias training amongst all of the staff in a district, and also mandating, diversity and, and equity and inclusion training, of all of our districts, and also looking to create some educator diversity councils, whether that be one for the state, whether that be one for each region of the Commonwealth, all right, to be able to elevate voices of diverse educators. So those are the big buckets in this Educator Diversity Act. And like I said, Alice Peisch and Senator Jason Lewis are the primary sponsors of the bill. And there's also a budget priority, in terms of the bill, that we're also leaning into as the FY23 budget gets under debate, and we're trying to also get the State House to increase the early college line item by 1.5 million. So there is a line item that that funds sort of early college and educator pathway. It's actually just the early college line right now, but we're trying to expand it so we can get more funds into the space to be able to so that the Department of Ed can provide more funds to districts across the Commonwealth to really expand the education pathways. So a lot of ways, maybe even model sort of the teacher cadet program that we have here in Boston to be able to expand it across the Commonwealth, while other districts want to do it too, because we know that we have a lot of students of color across the Commonwealth who might be interested or encouraged in going into education. We have all sorts of MECO kids who are from Boston, who are sitting in our schools around the Commonwealth, and so we want to be able to create pathways for all of our students and adults of color, no matter where they are in the state. But obviously, we need the funds to be able to do it. And then educator preparation funding. All right, so this is a proposed budgetary language. It'd be a new line item. So we'd like to infuse more money, or get the state to infuse more money into educator prep. To specifically then to give our state schools especially, all right, a resource, and even some of our districts who want to do in-house prep like we are doing, to be able to train and coach folks for state certified testing. So if we believe that the test is not going anywhere anytime soon, then everybody should be offering teacher educator prep test preparation. Not only our colleges who have preparation programs, but also our districts who might be bringing staff from their own communities but can't get them to pass the test. All right, and so we want to be able to lean into that space, more tuition based scholarships that might be directed completely towards educator diversity. All right, so education preparation is a big thing. Right now, I sit on the Department of Ed's Educator Preparation Evaluation Committee, and I think I'm doing MCLA this year. And Mass College of Liberal Arts this year. And certainly one of the things that I have been asking all of our educator preparation programs is, what are they doing about not only recruiting more educators of color into their ed prep programs, but what are they doing to really support them to be able to successfully make their way into our schools. And even for the white educators they have too, I've been asking the questions of our prep programs, what are they really doing to be sure that they're providing the culturally responsive training that our white educators need to be able to go into our urban communities. So that's a big thing too. So there's this whole action network, and I'll send these links to Jeff if you want to get more information, and you want to and if you want to check out anything. So there are so we do have an action network that has a petitions that go straight to the Joint Committee on Education, and you certainly can sort of chime in with your local state representative or state senator, see if they even heard about the Educator Diversity Act, or if they've read it, right, or if they plan to support it, right, and then certainly if you're part of an organization, that would like to lean into that space, we've got we have processes for organizations to be able to endorse the Educator Diversity Act also, and I'll send all that information to Jeff, and that is it. So I know that was a full load there, but that's kind of the stump that we're on. I'll certainly take any questions for however much time we have. I'm good until 9 o'clock when I have my next thing. But
yeah, I had a question on the cadet program.
Yeah.
Are the people that are involved in that, are they obligated to stay in the Boston public school system,
No, they're not. They well, I mean, it goes a couple of different ways. One, as we're trying to grow the pipeline to really keep the kids, attached and inspired, through the program, on we have put in a basic guarantee that you'd be hired should you return, to the BPS after finishing the program. All right, so on one incentive, if you do the program, if you, so we sort of start the program cultivating as here in middle school, seek to have you enroll in the full program when you're in high school. And there's a caveat there in terms of if you successfully finish the program, then there are scholarships at some of our partners. One is Regis and Excelsior now, where you can get a full tuition, scholarship to go like to Regis College to continue, your studies and whatever now you're going to plan to teach. All right, but with this idea that when you finish, when you get your degree right from Regis, that you're going to come right back to Boston to be able to work. All right, and we're beginning to sort of slot in to be sure that those folks are hired. But what we haven't done, we haven't said now once we hire you, you're required to stick around for the next 3 or 5 years. We'll see how that goes. But I think we'll see what the critical mass looks like. Well, the thing for us right now, we just want to be able to show a hope that what we're doing is actually going to work. So like I said, we have about 5 kids who are currently right now in undergrad, through our program that we started a few years ago. If we can be sure that they all finish undergrad, all right, obviously pass the teacher's test, giving them the focus, by giving them the direct support, and then hire them, all right, then I think we can sort of look at the next step, from there.
When did they start your department? Was that back in 1974?
Oh, no. So the Office of Diversity Programs, it started off as just the diversity programs. And I want to say that might have been, 2005. All right, it's maybe 2006, and it was a one-person show. Now the managing director is still there. My boss, her name is Sharon Daly, and she was the director of diversity programs. And just through her vision and leadership, she's been able to expand it now into the entire office of recruitment, cultivation, and diversity programs. So now in our 3 buckets, we're still doing the recruitment work. All right, but now we're doing the cultivating work, meaning trying to grow our own from in-house, and we're doing the retention work. And the retention work was really the last bucket, and that's where my position was created. But my position was only created at the from a budget standpoint at the start of the 2018-19 school year. They didn't fill it when they hired me until March of 2019. So it's really only about 2 years, 2 years worth of work now. So when I think about where we've been able to get the work, what's that about? Just about 15 years from 06 to now. We're there, and I say there's about 8 of us. So we've been able to grow the department from the one person where it started, and I believe there are 8 of us now. And I think one of the biggest moves was that the current superintendent took the team out of the Office of Human Capital and moved it up into the superintendent's office. So now we're sitting in what's called the Equity, Strategy, and Opportunity Gaps Division, and she made it into its own office because I think she wanted to give it more, she really kind of wanted to give us, just give us more face and, I think more policy stake in the game. But of course, we still could use some more staff. I know, hopefully I'm getting some help because the retention work, meaning sort of responsible for basically keeping an eye on all of the educators of color that we currently have in the district is really just me. I'm sort of a one-man show. So, it's great work, but it's sometimes it's a lot. Just a quick question here from Rick and Sharon here. So yeah, so we there is some focus within within our groups because there's a big need for science and math educators. That's probably and that's really across the board, right? and there's always a need for elementary educators. Our reading specialists. We actually have a good number of those. Certainly, space we try to lean into, but a lot of our elementary staff, where the real gap we're trying to close at the elementary level is having the majority, if not all, of our teachers be certified in moderate disabilities, and then also in English and teaching, in ESL, right, and teaching English as a second language, and partly because, especially in a place like Boston, but it's probably the case in some of the other larger districts like Lawrence, behavioral. Certainly when I was there, large population of English language learners, a lot of students on maybe on IEPs. IEPs or 504s. Some of our smaller districts, I think they usually what we call outsource or send out. We have the you see these collaboratives around, sort of these education collaboratives that really sort of teach and take care of a lot of our students who need special need services. But our bigger cities with it, they have to do it in house, and we're trying to do a little more, more inclusive within the classroom. So that's a big thing for us too, trying to figure out, and we have an internal program for that too, to get more people licensed in moderate disabilities in ESL. You really be hard pressed to get a job, especially at the elementary level, in the BPS without those licenses. And yes, and we do have applied behavior analysts, a ton of them in the Boston Public Schools, coordinated special education. You name, the role is there, and what we're trying to, and now beyond the teachers and the counselors, which was the original push in terms of that Garrity order, I have, and our recruitment team too, has really been seeking to lean in to make sure that, that really all of our departments, have a good share of diverse educators. Because I would argue for students of color, especially in the building, that's even based on my own experience. Yes, it was great for me to have, let's say, a Black math teacher, which I did when I was in high school. But it was just as important that that the secretary was a person of color, or the school nurse, right? So there are so many people, adults, who affect the success of a student, on a daily basis in the school building outside of the classroom, and we need to have diverse educators in those spaces too. Thanks, Ann.
So yeah, Martha says you must be a very busy person, and you certainly are. You haven't even talked about your charitable work with our conversation that we had on the ferry boat. You and your wife. It's just incredible. I don't know when you have time to sleep.
I don't. Well, who knows? I yesterday, real quick, I got up at like, I don't know, whatever it was, 4 a.m. Took the dog out because I had to get to the airport for a 6:45 flight. Now, I made my little Southwest Airlines flight with 4 minutes to spare, but because it's funny, it's doing nonprofit work. So I'm here in DC because I went to college at the Catholic University of America for undergrads, where I got my history degree from. It's my 20th college reunion. But for the last 17 years, I was also on the board here at the Catholic University, the alumni board, and I served 4 years as the president of the association. But yesterday was my last official day on the board after 17 years of service. So it'd be nice to get that time back. This was the biggest capacity thing I had, because when I was in charge, I had to come to DC. What my predecessors and my successor had going for them, they all lived in the Washington, D.C. area, so they could drive to campus for whatever. But when I was the president, I had to come down from Boston. and I was coming down once a month, at time, sometimes when I was the president, for different events and things like that. So, so that was the biggest thing. So it's nice to go back to civilian life in terms of my college, but that's been a great experience. Yeah, and some of the other things I'm involved in, Constitution Museum, Youth Enrichment Services, which is like a nonprofit organization in Boston that supports kids with outdoor experiences, and they teach them how to ski. My two daughters do it. Actually, that's how they learned how to ski. So we try to lean in, but I'm trying to do it while I'm still young. I'm only 43, right? Like and, while the energy is still up, right? Like,
Right.
We'll see where it goes. Yeah, Lee, you got a question?
Yeah, well, for one, I'm just delighted with the depth and the breadth of the program that you've created. From the middle school to retention of senior people and the number of different ways you've thought about that's just outstanding. My question may be a little bit outside your portfolio. I retired from being a teacher about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And there was a beginning then and continuing now within the communities that I know about. So I have a deterioration in the relationship between the teachers and the administrators and the school boards, such that the kind of warm and welcoming workplace that I think is necessary for anybody to come into, but especially if you're trying to bring people into as diverse backgrounds. Do you have any insight into what can be done to make the entire professional environment that a teacher comes into more receptive and less painful to be in, I guess is the way to put it. And I don't know if there's been a change for the better since.
Yeah.
I've talked to people in the last few years, but
sure. No, I get it.
I've heard about it in other places in the state. This is your statewide thing.
Sure. No, I get it. And it's really hard right now. And I do worry about all of our educators, regardless of their race or ethnicity, because people are coming and going left and right. One of the things I do have access to, it's a little painful, and partly because I have to do exit interviews with all the educators of color, something I created and decided to do. But every week I get I get sort of the retirement and resignation list, when we have had more people, I think, on the resignation side of that sheet than we have on the retirement side, in the last sort of year or so, partly just because of all of the changes in what we've had to do because of the pandemic. But yes, but pandemic aside, yes, it's not a very healthy environment right now, especially in our business. But I do think, as I hear from most of my educators, so I guess I can only provide some what I've heard from folks that I've had exit interviews with, and I've been trying to use this information to inform what we do moving forward. It's for the teachers especially, it's still about the support and the respect they feel like they're getting from their school leadership. So we still know that leadership matters, and we're really trying to lean in, especially at the district level, because we have what's called our school superintendent, so the people who are responsible for supervising the principals. And we're really trying to tell them that, you really have to have a better job of monitoring your principals, providing them the support and the training, about staff management, right? And I think a lot of our principals at times, they don't really get a lot of human resource training. Right. I mean, I think they know what instruction looks like, right? They know what classroom management looks like. They certainly have been well trained in or even obviously they even know what sort of disciplines like, programming, how to support their families. But I'm not sure if a lot of them really get, when you go from the classroom to the administration, especially, if they really get an understanding of how to manage adults, right? Like, because you didn't really do it, right? You were managing kids, right, for years, right? And all of a sudden now we send you to the principal's office, and now you're managing adults, and it's a different ball game. All right. So what are your relationship building skills, right? So what are your abilities, especially if you're a white leader, to be able to talk to your adults who don't look like you? I mean, vice versa. How do you balance off how you ensure that that your parents respect the space? When I was administrator, I would tell all of my teachers to say, look, your primary responsibility is to teach and take care of the kids. You focus there. I will take care of everything else. All right. Now, don't blindside me, but if you get into a spot that's going to be difficult, or you think, or need some help with the parent or whatever community, then let me know. I'll be happy to have that conversation and to be able to, have the right process goes through. But I think a lot of our school leaders are left on their own, so then they leave their teachers on their own, and then they they don't support the environment. And I will say, when I walk around our school district, you can tell the healthy environments for everybody when you walk in the door. And a lot of it really starts with the person who's running the school. So I think that's what we have to do, Lee. I think we have to get more people better prepared for for people management. And that's principals to educators, adults. That's superintendents to their principals, that's school committee. And look, and I'm a little apprehensive about if you haven't heard, because on the ballot in November, when we go to vote for mayor in Boston, we'll also have a non-binding referendum to potentially go back to an elected school committee. And I know actually Boston's the only district in the Commonwealth that still has an appointed school committee. But I'm kind of comfortable in that space. All right. The voters might have to be careful what they wish for. But even whether your school committee is elected or appointed, you also have to have that too, because I also think a lot of folks who run and get elected to school committee, may not have a whole lot of experience on how to manage, and how to manage adults. It can't be all just checking boxes. You actually have to be able to build relationships, cultivate trust. And in our work, trust is a big deal. And I think people just, and even myself, because I'm still the boogeyman from central office. And I know that, right? And I even told the boss, I said, even my educators of color, there's no guarantee that that they're going to want to talk to me just because I'm an educator of color too, right? I actually have to build a relationship, cultivate some trust, know what I'm talking about, remind them that I was a teacher too, so I've been in the trenches. All right, that's the other piece, Lee. Anything we can do to stop allowing people to just teach for a year, go to Harvard, and then run a school building. That's another problem too. And I think any of you, if you're in any of these processes in your own towns and communities, when they bring the new high school principal around, for the community meet and greet and so forth, you gotta ask them how long they taught. All right, because that's the key street cred. And we have so many people in this Commonwealth running school buildings who just didn't teach long enough. All right, and I just think that's unfair to the staff. It's unfair to the students, because you can't learn how to run a school building from a Harvard classroom. So that's my other that's my other piece. And look,
Amen.
I taught for 9 years, and I didn't even think I taught long enough. But it's a little more street credit, than I think a lot of my peers, especially my younger peers, because there's a lot of, principals, they're 38, 39 years old. They taught for a minute, and now they're running a school building. It's just, it's not sustainable.
Linda, excuse me, do you have a question about METCO?
Well, I taught in a school that had a METCO program, and I was so glad to hear you say that you included the METCO kids too, because we had students who would be terrific teachers. And so I'm glad it's not just kids who go to school in Boston, but kids who were in the METCO program as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I grew up in Concord, and he started the METCO program, I think, in 66, 67 or something. What do you think of that program in general?
Well, I never begrudge, I think, families who seek the opportunity, right, try to have because they have their kids, their best interest of their kids in mind. I just wonder about I do think the majority of the students who have done the program have gotten a quality education. Look, if you get a chance to go to some of our high schools around the Commonwealth, there's some really good schools that maybe it maybe that you just didn't get a chance to do it, in Boston for whatever the reason. But, you know, I do wonder just about the long-term just sort of connection and socialization, right? Because you are going out, you know, outside of your community to get this education, but then you're going right back into the city. And so I don't know if they really have built a real connection between the towns that serve these students, and maybe even, you know, and maybe even the educators, to also the communities in which the kids, you know, in which the kids live, you know. So I mean, look, I mean, I might, you know, if I had a MECO program at whoever, at a Wellesley High or something, I might take all my staff and just, you know, have them take a field trip to Dorchester or something like that, right? Just so they could understand where the kids are from, and you know, so so yeah, it's it's interesting. I don't think it's going anywhere, like, you know, but I know that our current superintendent, you know, I mean, would like to be able to get us further on the stump of improving the school system systematically, and I guess sort of philosophically, in order to get as many kids to stay in the Boston schools, you know what I mean, as opposed to maybe having the MECO be their first choice. Because at one point, it might be still the case, people were signing up for MECO really out of the womb. You know, they weren't even given the BPS. They weren't even giving the BPS a chance. You know, I don't know how I feel about that, but you know, because I'm still, you still have to guarantee me that it's the right fit. So, but Jeff, I'm gonna have to hop off because I have to.
Oh, okay, great.
Virtual thing.
Thanks.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
But here's the deal: when you guys finally safely get back to having these breakfasts in person, because I like to eat, I will come back and, right? And let's continue this conversation. Okay.
Okay, great.
Yeah. All right. And please find the Educator Diversity Act on the State House website. The hearing is on Monday. It's an interesting process, and I'll be interested to see, at least initially, you know, what the state what the state legislators, you know, think about it. Should be a good debate.
Great. Thanks a lot,
All right,
Rashawn.
take care, everybody. All right.
Bye-bye.
Rest of the weekend.